Right. We are moving onwards now to the second talk of this panel, and the prize for the best title of it, because we have, this is Semitilex, one database to rule them all. So that we just love that title as a so Todd Krause is a research linguist at the Linguistics Research Center of the University of Texas at Austin. He has a background in natural sciences, so has fallen into linguistic study among the good company, of course. And he currently helps the LRC produce and extend its collection of language lessons for the early Indo-European online collection and the Indo-European lexicon as well of historical edema for the Indo-European language family tree. He will be discussing the new, I hear, brand new Semitilex database project. So we are honored that this is the opening night, so to speak, of the world tour of Semitilex. So I think everything is functioning. Recording is on, so I'll allow you to take the floor now. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Get up here. Okay, so that's me. I'm Todd Krause. I am working with Nama Patel in Middle Eastern Studies at UT Austin and an affiliate of the LRC, and with our director, Danny Law. And we're putting together this new project. For up till now, we've been calling it Semitilex. As I was putting this slideshow together, Semitictionary came to mind. So I'll leave it up to you guys. You guys can tell me afterward what you like better or any other suggestions you might have. So what incarnation am I talking about? First, you can imagine the outline of this talk is kind of obvious, right? I'll tell you what you need to know, then I'll tell you what we plan to do, then I'll tell you what we've done so far, and then where we're going, okay? All right, so like I said, what incarnation am I talking about? So I'll just say caveat at this point, this talk would be really awesome if a Semitist was giving it to you, but they sent me, okay? So if you have really technical Semitic-based questions, direct them please to Nama or direct them to me and I will pass them along, okay? But what we're trying to do is a Semitic etymological dictionary database with standalone dictionaries and with text, and you might be asking at this point, why? Because you might be a Semitist and you might say, we've got tons of these. And I would say, you're probably right, but they have deficiencies in certain aspects, not like this won't, right? But this will hopefully have not those same deficiencies. Okay, so first off, first problem to deal with is linguistics is a mess, all right? You might be a Semitist and you might have some inspiration to do some studies, like you want to figure out, do cognate nouns have the same plural morphemes across Semitic, right? Or if you have a particular morpheme, is that going to be a plural for feminine nouns across Semitic, right? Or you might wonder, does a certain semantic group always have feminine gender across Semitic? Like you could talk about body parts, right? Are body parts always feminine across Semitic? You might be Nama Patel and you might have actually done all of these studies, right? You might have found that it's not true in any Semitic language, right? But how would you do this? Well, you'd go to the dictionary or a dictionary or the various dictionaries of each of these languages, and you would go through them volume by volume if they're multi-volume, and then you go through those page by page, and you'd be cursing out the author of the dictionary, but you would do your study slogging through it that way, and then you'd publish your results as she might have done, right? So we want to try to avoid that. Of course, there's stuff on the internet, but the internet is a little tangly mess as well. You have some awesome resources, right? This one here, the annotated cuneiform corpus, right? It's actually fantastic. I've looked at it myself. The trick is, if you're trying to do it for use it for lexical research, then what you actually get there are glosses of the words in that particular text, but you can't necessarily extend that into meanings in other texts, right? The Semitic etymological database online, now that one's pretty well named, right? So you could think that that is pretty awesome, and it is, right? But the information is technical, so you have to be a Semitist to really know what's going on there. And sometimes the information that's given is limited, let me just say, compared to what we'd like to see, right? This comprehensive Aramaic lexicon project, all right, so you have to know several scripts to use that. You have to also know a fair bit about the dialectology there to be able to understand the information they're presenting. Arabic lexicon, you have to know the Arabic script. So even if you're a Semitist where your forte is in, let's say, Hebrew, maybe you're not as comfortable with the Arabic script, that would limit your access to this. Here, this is an awesome dictionary to look at, but if you want to go through it, you have to actually like page through the PDFs, which is just terrible, right? So there are awesome resources online, but each of them has some gaps that we'd like to try to overcome in what we'd like to do. So what would we like to give you some sense of what we're talking about here, right? So here is a Syriac dictionary, right? So it gives you the plural here, the gender. The trick is you need to know the Syriac script. You also need to know the vocalization, right? The words here are organized by roots, so you have to be able to abstract the root from whatever form you happen to be looking at. So it's great if you know Syriac. It's not so great if you're coming from outside that particular subdiscipline. Akkadian, this one's actually great. So this is kind of nice. Everything's transliterated and it's actually in English alphabetical order. So that's great if you're coming from outside the discipline. Right, but you do have to know what semerograms are, things of that sort. And this is not organized by root, this is organized by infinitive. So even if you thought the root thing was great, hey, you're a Semitist, of course you need to do roots, right? Well then, yeah, unless you do Akkadian, and then it's the other way around. Okay, so different issues for different, so Brown, Driver, and Briggs, this is an awesome one, right? So it gives you all of this comparative information, except that to use that information, you have to know every one of those scripts, right? So that's an awesome collection, but also a huge barrier to entry, right? And this also refers things to roots, to verbal roots, but even if it's like primarily a nominal item, right? So you kind of have to abstract to verbal root, even if there's no attestation of that word as a verb. So awkward, let's say. Arabic dictionary by Ware, right? This one is great in that it gives you some transliteration, right? But I don't know Arabic, of course, right? I get the impression that this is not vocalized, right? So you have to be stinking good at Arabic, right? And it doesn't actually transliterate everything, just kind of the entry at the beginning. Okay, so again, an incredible resource, but a huge barrier to entry. This one has some vocalization, but it gives you no information on the inflection of the word, right? So it just gives you, I've been told this means the plural, right? So you have to know, right? For some reason you get the gender in English, right? But when you want to find the plural, you have to know the Arabic terminology for plural, right? So, wow, that's just an impressive decision right there. Comparative dictionary is, right? So this one's kind of cool, right? This is comparative. This is kind of like what we want to do, right? So it actually has etymologies, has the script here, the original script, and its transliteration, which is great, but it doesn't give you the script for any of the other stuff it does. And so, as I understand from Semitists that I've talked to, right, the script can be ambiguous, right, on cue, ambiguous as to like gemination and things of that sort. So if you don't give the script, then what you are getting is that author's interpretation of what the script's rendering, and it leaves you, you kind of have to back out of the transliteration, figure out what the script was, and then come up with your own idea of what you might be looking at as a different explanation. right? It does give you a nice, shall we say, appendix of etymological roots, and that's fantastic. The trick is some of it is, let's just say, speculative, okay? So that's running through kind of the issues that you confront when you're using the resources that are out there. So what we're trying to do is provide a resource that targets basically three groups. First is scholars inside the discipline, so Semitists, right? This should be usable by people who specialize in these languages when they open the cover, so to speak, right? When they log on to this thing, they should be able to see stuff that they recognize. So they should be able to see the scripts, right? And if there's transliteration, should be transliteration that they recognize, right? But we also want to open this up to scholars outside the discipline, either in other branches of Semitic or beyond Semitic altogether, right? And there you would like, for example, if linguists from other areas are going to approach this, you want to give them a transcription that makes sense to linguists who are outside of Semitics, okay? And so that the interface has to help them, and if it's going to give, let's say, morphological information, it should be in terms that they also understand. We actually like doing stuff for the general public. I always just think of myself as like a perpetual dilettante, right? And so I'm always trying to learn the next awesomest language. And so I always think of myself as like the test case for this category, which is somebody who on a good day thinks he's not terribly stupid, but totally does not understand this stuff yet, right? But I could get there if you give me the right foothold. And you will be surprised what people would do with resources that are even this technical if you give them access to it. My favorite example up to now has been with the Indo-European lexicon that we have at the LRC. Somebody actually just wrote us an email saying, thank you so much for putting this online. It was so great. I just love to kind of peruse it. And the person actually gave me a link to an online visual presentation of a gallery exhibition that she did. She actually created paintings based on the etymological relationships that she was just perusing on the Indo-European lexicon, right? So it turned into a whole art installation, right? All I do is I put word lists up there and I like link them back and forth, right, with etymologies. She took it, ran with it, and created this whole visual presentation to it. So I urge everybody here, myself included, to always keep this group in mind, because then that will feed back into how you think about your own discipline. Okay. So the plan, what are we trying to do? So, we're trying to create an etymological dictionary. Okay, so that means we need a list of etyma, we need reflexes for each one of those, and we'd like to be able to search by the head word, if we're thinking of this as a dictionary where your head word is the etyma, right? But we're in the computer age, we can reverse that, right? So if we have the list of all of the reflexes broken down by language, well, then we can just say, okay, language A, give me all the reflexes that show up in the data. Language B, give me all the reflexes that show up in the data, etc. And so now you have standalone dictionaries for languages A and B, right? And they're actually linked to one another if you have all of the linking worked out online, so that you can click on some word in Arabic, then you trace it back to its etymon and trace that over to Hebrew, and you create your own webomology going from one language to the other. You have this networked collection of self-standing dictionaries, all connected through a hub that's an etymological dictionary, okay? To help out people like my artist friend, right? My artist friend is not coming through being like, hey, I'm looking at this Arabic word, right? Or this Hebrew word. I don't know that, right? I'm not a specialist. They're thinking like, what are words for, I think she focused on cattle, right? Livestock, right? Other people send in emails asking about body parts, of course, words for hand and things like that. So you want to give people a way to access the content without having to know specifically what they're looking for in linguistic terms, right? So we do a lot of semantic tagging that allows people who come in with more general queries to make their way through the dictionary, okay? Platinum level, let me just be clear, all of this is free, right? There's no charging for this, screw that, right? But the high class level, shall we say, is you guys are scholars and you will look at the website and you'll be like, oh yeah, nice on a good day, but not exactly what I needed. I wish I just had access to the data, and we'll be like, bam, you got it, right? We're there for you. So what we want is also a table display somewhere so that you can just say, I want these columns of the data, and you can just hide those other columns of the data. And I'm going to do my search. And then once I'm done with my search, just download. Okay, or actually just download the data first and do your munging at home. Okay, so that is something else we'd also like to do there. Also, this is, let's say, atypical for lexical resources. Sometimes it's just not enough, even for a specialist, but also for a member of the general public to just see a word, right? And then meanings of that word. That sometimes just doesn't give you a feel for either how that word or how that language functions. So it'd be nice to have example texts that give you a feel for, here's how Hebrew sentence structure looks in typical biblical passage. Here's a typical Akkadian cuneiform text, right? Things of that sort, so that you can see the language in the wild. Of course, we want to annotate this so that you can figure out what each word is doing, but also you want the phrasal structure and the whole sentential structure, right? So you want to also give a gloss at every level, okay? So we want to do that, and we want to do it with notation that works not only for the specialist, but for people who, let's say, they just started learning biblical Hebrew and their textbooks have a certain way of explaining a verb form, but a linguist wouldn't write it that way, all right? So you want to have various types of explanations or tagging for these various elements of data, let's say. Okay, so at this point, we're in the pilot phase of this project, right? So this is like no great reveal, go out in the world and you'll see our beautiful thing, right? Where we're at this point is you will see our little teeny thing and we will hope to make it much bigger, right? So to start out, to see if we could pull this off, we had a basic list of roughly 60 verbal edema and 120 nonverbal. And then if you take these 5 languages, that gives you about 120 reflexes for verbs and 500 for nonverbal stuff, right? So you take that, and then we want to annotate all of those with the basic lexical and etymological stuff, but we also want them in their original scripts, and then Semitist transcription, IPA transcription. We want some of their morphological patterns, both nominal and verbal items, and actually stuff that goes even farther afield in terms of sentence structure, let's say, so verbal complement patterns, right? Like maybe this particular verb takes its object with a preposition, right? Or maybe it takes 2 different prepositions in different meanings. It would be nice for a linguist or a Semitist to be able to just do a search on that kind of complement structure. So how do we pull this off? So we've already got the Indo-European lexicon online. And that's a pretty decent resource. Of course, I'm biased, right? But so that already gives you the list of the etymological roots. And then you have the reflexes in all the daughter languages, and you can do the sort on daughter languages, right? So in some sense, the way I described it, like we're done even before we start. Except that if you want a truly self-standing dictionary, you've also got to be able to insert in, let's say, your Arabic dictionary, you've got to be able to insert words that don't yet have an etymology, right? So our self-standing dictionaries really are only lists of the reflexes that we've been able to link to the edema. So we need to build in the capacity for those things to truly stand on their own, be a dictionary that can have words with etymologies or not, and if they have etymologies, they link to the central hub, and you can link across other dictionaries, but you need to also be able to add other words that are sort of freestanding, right? So that's what we're trying to do to get this up and running at the moment. So we take our robust data in spreadsheet format, and then we try to mush it online. So if this doesn't look pretty to you, we are in heated agreement, right? But we're trying to get stuff on the page in the right place-ish, right? So the particular word you're looking for in the particular language you're looking for, and the specific data, and then a way of looking that up, right? So you want to be able to look it up. So this is covered. I guess I scrolled down a little bit, but there's a search bar there that you can uncover. But you can just go through the headwords in either transcription or normal script and click on them and pull this up, right? And from wherever you are, you might want to jump to a different language. And so we have a menu for different languages, including the program language. Don't mind this. This is just us saying, here's what's left to do on this page. Okay, so notes to ourselves, right? But you can see the headword search here. But if you click over on the categories, then that will give you blocks of coarser classifications. And then if you click on one of those, like I clicked on body parts and functions, that'll give you a list of some classifications within that. So you get hair, skin, hide, flesh, horn, things of that sort. So I clicked on tongue, and the one root that we have represented is the same root that I showed you in all of the other dictionaries before. So you can click on that. That takes you to the etymological dictionary, and then you click through all of the other dictionaries. Okay, and then the next phase, where do we go from here? So that stuff we have on the page, but we got to prettify it and make sure that it's all functioning correctly. After we do that, then we start adding the text. Now, we already have EIEOL, so the Early Indo-European Online Lesson Series. In each lesson from any of those series, the hidden gem, let's say, is an annotated original text, right? So we already have this ability to take a text and annotate it linguistically with all of the grammatical details. Typically, though, those are grammatical details that are at the level of what I was calling pedagogical parsing, right? Like what you would encounter in a class on this language. But if we want to be able to serve the needs and interests of specialists, we need more levels of annotation. And like we were talking earlier, more levels of transcription, especially if you're going to do something like cuneiform, okay? And so we also have to upgrade that system a little bit, and then we'll start with a biblical Hebrew and an Akkadian passage to make sure things are functioning smoothly, all right? And then after that will come the table display. So have you guys seen this website? So this is all from the Languages of New York City. This website is fantastic, right? So anyhow, this survey data of what languages people speak in and around New York City, right? But when you're a linguist like ourselves here, right, you go to the back end, to the data tab, and what do they have? They have all of their data, just spreadsheet form, and you can filter on each of those, and you can click on what columns of the data you want to include and what columns you don't, right? So that is the kind of access we'd like to give y'all to the system we're trying to create, okay? So in summary, beyond the book, now, right, when you create a physical print dictionary, you have to tailor it to the one audience that you're really trying to reach. When you're online, not so much. Like you can, if on the same data, if you've tailored it well, you can actually have the user click on different options and it will redisplay, giving them the stuff they want. So we want to go beyond the book in that sense, right? And use the dictionary as a database, right? Something that is beyond just strictly lexical information, that goes beyond that to semantic categories, to other structures that you can do searches on that will actually further your research, right? It doesn't need to be so hard, right? Nama has done it the hard way and she's like, I'm done with that, thank you, right? Let's create a whole online etymological dictionary to make all of this crap much easier. So far, we've got the basic lexical items, we've got the semantic searches and that stuff. The next part is to do the text, then the data mungification, right? So that you can choose the columns you want. And then we got to do data embiggening, right? So we can't just rely on 60 verbal roots and 120 nonverbal, right? We need a heck of a lot more data before it becomes interesting to folks like yourselves. And that's where we would love any help that anybody is willing to offer, or any suggestions or any thoughts or any complaints or whatever you have. Okay, so thank you very much and I hope to see you. That too long?
Does anybody have any questions?
Fascinating, hugely ambitious. I was pleased to see some Akkadian script up there.
Yes, exactly.
My question is, how would you represent an Akkadian word written as a Sumerian Sumerogram? Would you include that in your script? For Exani, for example.
So I'm not sure I quite get the import of what you're talking about. Put it this way, right? So if there's a Sumerogram there, we'd have a transcription.
Someone writing the word tongue,
right,
in Akkadian,
right,
might spell it syllabically. I'm going to talk about this later as well, by the way.
Okay.
So if people don't get it, I can cover it again. But they might write the cuneiform sign, which represents the Sumerian word emek.
Right. Yeah.
Followed by a phonetic complement.
Totally
to
understand.
indicate that it's to be read as Sani.
Yes. So
would you represent that and explain
yes,
that?
and yes, and yes, right? So the basic idea is put the cuneiform there, then have the standard serologist transcription of that, right? The narrow transcription. So just the conventional ways of representing the cuneiform symbols that are there. Then after that, we have the, let's say, phonetically plausible reconstruction of that. And then after that, you have the IPA version of that. So like all of the above, right? That's what we're going for, because exactly that, right? Because it's like screwy at all levels, right? So you need to have all of it there.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sure.
Right, Aaron was next.
Thanks. Yeah, it's fascinating. So I guess a lot of questions percolate up, and I'm sort of happy to wait to see how we get to
you and me both.
Yeah. But let me ask you a question on the data side. And it's the interaction between the etymons and the daughter languages. So are you feeding in lexicons of all the daughter languages and then reconstructing the etymons, or are you starting with etymons? Because what if there's a plausibly Proto-Semitic word that happens to exist only in Akkadian? What are we doing there?
That would be awesome, right? Like at the level we're at this point, it's like grunge work, right? Like let us just go through the dictionary.
How much is it actually saving? That's actually I'm wondering. Like it sounds like actually a massive amount of human time to create this.
Yes, hence the you. But also, at some point you can start to automate that process. In fact, that's kind of what we did with the Indo-European lexicon, right? You had an original core of stuff that was pulled in from standard sources and then amplified automatically once we had in place certain rules that seemed to gather what we needed, right? The trick is it all depends very critically on what stuff you have available in a digital format that you can parse, right? Like maybe if we do OCR really well, we could just do it straight off of other sources, but that'd be a lot of hand correcting anyhow, right? But the idea in the ideal world is to go in the direction you're talking about. But first, what we need to do is get the moving pieces in place. And then, we try to fill it out as automatically as possible And then either you, meaning me, go through it, or Nama in this case, go through it and sort of do a reality check, or you also have my email on the site so that anybody can email me and tell me, hey, Todd, you really screwed up on that one, right? So can you please change that, right? So, you know, in that sense, almost crowdsourcing, right? That actually is a good sanity check sometimes. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It sounds very daunting.
Welcome to my work, but yes. Yeah, yes, sir.
I've got a question which I think is very related to that. Would you comment on how you feel about AI finding cognates that we don't know?
Depends on what you mean by AI, right? So what kind of tool are you thinking about?
Machine learning tricks. So for instance, I don't know at the moment if I were to quiz ChatGPT on the relationships between Semitic words, but it seems to me that there is an exciting possibility that we'll get to a point where we've told our system enough that it would find things that scholars haven't found.
Yeah, so this is an awesome question. So I've been immersing myself in the ChatGPT world recently, and so I would not trust ChatGPT, a generative system like that, to do what you're talking about, right? Because it's building up its internal word model, but in some sense it has no memory after that, right? So it will just answer, its answer will be what feels right at the moment, right? Based on whatever its word model was. So I don't think at this point, at least, you could use a tool like that, right? If you're using other, let's say, lower level, strictly machine learning tools, like what you would have called machine learning like 5 or 10 years ago, then I think those would be easier to use and evaluate quickly, right? If you're just trying to create a vector for words and then do like a cosine distance between them or something like that, then that stuff can at least probably get you in the ballpark quickly without having to worry about a hallucination, but still having to say, okay, but now I have to figure out why this would be the edema, right? So I think that could be used in certain cases, but I wouldn't throw it at something that's a GPT style system. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I think we'll have to close there. We won't have anything left of our afternoon break.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Todd, again.